I'm going to talk about the 5 best parts about being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver. With everything going on in the ride-sharing world, there's a lot of pros and a lot of cons to Lyft and Uber, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There's a lot of pros and a lot of cons, and I've done a bunch of videos about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And being honest, I feel like in the past 4 or 5 months, I've talked more and focused more on the bad and the ugly. I've talked a lot about all the negative stuff happening in the ride-sharing world. However, with all that being said, because I'm very transparent in my videos, and I like to look at both sides of the equation, in this video, I really want to talk about all the amazing benefits there are to being a driver. There's a ton of amazing things about being a rideshare driver that, I'm going to be blunt, don't really exist in any other profession, especially when you combine all these 5 elements that I'm going to talk about in this video. Number 1, instantaneously flexible. This is the biggest benefit we all know, and I stress the word instantaneously, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But as we all know, Uber and Lyft, it's flexible. This is why for a lot of people, they look at it as a great secondary job or even a full-time job, right? There's pros on both sides. If, let's say, you already have a 9-to-5 job and you need a job for extra side cash, you want to save up for a vacation. I remember when I was a DJ, I was saving up for like a new piece of equipment or something. Lyft and Uber is perfect for that. Or let's say you drive full-time. Well, I've talked to some full-time drivers, or excuse me, a lot of full-time drivers who are like, yeah, it's great. I don't have a boss. I don't have to have someone saying, oh, you have to get in at 9, get in at 5. You don't have to be rushing to get to work early or late or all this kind of stuff. You could just do it on your own. If, like, say, your daughter or son has a certain dance recital or a musical thing or a soccer game going on at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, you don't have to beg your boss for work off. You just stop driving, go to the game. Maybe you're already driving anyway, so you might as well pick them up, drop them off. You go back out and drive. You can completely do it however you want and whenever you want. And another big advantage of Lyft and Uber that I will say, to me, is actually a bigger benefit is it's instantaneously flexible. And I stress that word, and I want to say that because I have had some people be like, hey, Mark, so you tell Lyft and Uber when you're going to drive, right? You're like, all right, just so you know, this week, Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., Friday night and Saturday night or whatever. No. You can turn on the app at no warning to Lyft and Uber, and you can turn it off, at no warning to Lyft and Uber. It's truly instantaneously flexible. And I want to stress that word because I have actually done jobs that were like gig economy type jobs, right? This has been very popular in terms of just the given economy, right? Where a lot of people are doing things like delivery driving or rideshare driving or whatever. And it's just the word instantaneous because for me personally, I've tried and experimented with a lot of different ways to make money. Way more than you can ever imagine. From random sites like Slice the Pie, which I don't think even exists anymore, to hub pages, to blogging, to of course YouTube, which luckily YouTube, in my opinion, is the GOAT of making money online, to being an accountant, to being a real estate agent, to being a manager at Microsoft. I've done a lot of different jobs. And when it comes to ones that are flexible, put that in quotation marks, you'd be surprised how many of them say, oh, we're flexible. But then when you get into the nitty gritty, you do have to kind of tell them when you're going to work. They say, hey, we're flexible, work whenever you want. But then they're like, oh, by the way, we just have to know. So you have to let us know, are you going to be working Monday? Are you going to be working Tuesday? What hours? So you kind of have to let them know in advance, which bittersweet, right? I will say that, I guess depending on how you look at it. But it is kind of annoying that, yes, it's flexible, but there is a bit of that annoying asterisk on the word flexible. Not the case with Lyft and Uber. You can drive however you want, whenever you want. It is truly, in my opinion, one of the most instantaneously flexible jobs you can possibly do. Number 2, instant cash outs. I don't know why more people don't talk about this. Like, it's weird that when people talk about Lyft and Uber, of course the flexible schedule is amazing, right? Like I just said in point number 1, but I think most people know that. This is one that I don't know why more people don't talk about. And that is when it comes to Lyft and Uber, any single time you make money, you hit a button and that money is instantly, and I mean instantly, in your bank account. Now, taking a massive step back, for most jobs, they typically pay bi-weekly. I think that's kind of the standard. It's like, I remember when I was an accountant, every 2 weeks on Friday at like a given time, or maybe it was Thursday at midnight, I can't remember, I get my paycheck, right? It was a very steady paycheck every 2 weeks. Getting paid bi-weekly is pretty standard. Does depend on the job, though. For example, with YouTube, which is kind of weird, you get paid once a month. Google owns YouTube, in case you didn't know. and every YouTuber in the world gets paid, I think it's around like the 21st or 22nd of every month, depending, I believe it falls on a given business day or not, right? It also depends too. For music, for example, in case you don't know, I release music. I'm an electronic musician. I release music through a distributor called DistroKid. I get my money, I think like 2 or 3 months after someone listens to my music. So someone, like, say, buys my album on January 1st. I might not get that money till like middle of March, maybe, right? So there's so many lags. And then some jobs, now bringing back to Lyft and Uber, typically pay weekly. So with Lyft and Uber, if let's say you didn't touch the app, you just drove and made money, you would actually get paid every single week, which already is pretty good. Getting paid weekly is a lot better than most jobs. You know, I've done a lot of independent contractor jobs. In case you didn't know, if you're a rideshare driver, more likely than not, you're gonna be an independent contractor. I've done a lot of independent contractor jobs that paid maybe monthly or maybe even every 3 weeks or whatever, when I was a brand ambassador, for example. No, Lyft and Uber, typically it's weekly. But then going more relevant to this point, there's also instant cash outs. So once you make, let's say, $10, $20, $30, whatever the amount is, you can hit a button and that money's instantly in your bank account. And it's not like Venmo. With Venmo, in case you don't know, you can send money and receive money from friends and family and etc. With Venmo, yeah, you can instantly, I put that in quotation marks, cash it out, but it might take 2 to 3 business days for it to actually appear in your account. Not the case with Uber and Lyft. It is instantaneous, which is amazing. That means if, let's say, you have a bill that you need to pay, and you're like, shoot, I need $100 like right now. This bill's due tomorrow. If I don't pay it, I'm gonna get a huge fine and a fee. They're gonna, ask me for more money. Boom, you go out, drive, make $100, hit a button, that money's instant in your account, and then you can pay it off. Now, you may be wondering, okay, well, does this cost any extra money though? There are sometimes some fees. Off the top of my head, I can't remember how it works exactly for each individual app in terms of like the nitty gritty, but I think Lyft charges, I believe it's like 85 cents or 50 cents. I'm pretty sure it's 85 cents. So if you make $100, you're technically going to be getting what, like $99.15. So like the 85 cent fee, completely worth it to instantly have that money in your account. It's going to be less than $1 for both, right? And this is what's so convenient about Lyft and Uber is when you combine that with the flexible schedule. It's not like, say, when I was an accountant, that any single day I could be like, oh, you know what? Today was a good day being an accountant. I mean, you make the same amount of money when you're an accountant. I'm going to hit a button and cash out. Like, no, Lyft and Uber, it's awesome that you can, if you want to, like I said, if you need to pay a bill, you didn't realize it till like the last second, you're like, oh, shoot, you know what? I'm going to go out, drive, make money, hit a button, boom, I now have that money. There were times, I remember way back in the day, I think it was Lyft, talking about some Uber and Lyft history. Lyft was the first app out of the both to have an instant cash out feature. It cost 50 cents and went up to 85 cents now, inflation or whatever. And when it comes to Lyft, back in the day, this doesn't exist anymore, but back in the day, you had to make at least $50. That was the rule if you wanted to do instant cash outs. So for me, I remember, let's say on a Friday, when I was going to go out with friends, and I was super broke back in the day, and I was like, all right, I want some money just for, like, ironically, Uber, so I had to drive for Uber to pay for my Ubers when going out. I want some money from, like, say, drinks, maybe if I get food after drinking or whatever. So what I did is I said, you know what? Well, I have to make $50 in order to get instant cash outs. Why not just do that? I went out, I drove, I made $50, hit a button, it was instantly in my bank account. Boom, now I have money for that night. And you can easily do this as much as you want. Instant cash outs, I think, honestly, the most underrated part about driving for Uber and Lyft. Number 3, low barrier to entry. This is another underrated one that I think not a lot of people think about. It's almost so obvious that we don't even realize it, if that makes sense. Now, when it comes to the flexible schedule, of course, we all know about that. When it comes to the instant cash outs, I say, if anything, like I said, the most underrated part about driving with Lyft and Uber, in addition, most people probably don't even know that you can instantly cash out your earnings as a rideshare driver. This one, though, I think is so obvious we don't think about it, and I've mentioned it in a bunch of other videos, and my dedicated subscribers know what I'm about to talk about, and that is, you can start driving for Uber and Lyft with just a driver's license, and most people have a driver's license. So if you think about it, for most jobs, you need, usually a college certification, you need some type of certificate, you need some kind of degree, and you need at least something which wastes your money and your time in order to start working. It's kind of that odd, a bit unfortunate scenario of one, having to spend money to make money, and then two, this paradox when it comes to a car, that you need a job to buy a car, but then you need a car to buy excuse me, not to buy a job, but to have a job, right? It's kind of this job car paradox. However, with Uber and Lyft, one, all you need is a driver's license. If you have your own car, boom, you're good to go. You can start driving. And then two, on top of this, even if you don't have a car, you can rent one through Uber and Lyft. It costs about $200 to $300 a week. I'd say as time is going on, it's pushing more towards $300 a week. You're looking about $1,200 a month. And I'm not going to lie, it's a good amount of money. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But you can go out and drive and have that freedom to work however you want, whenever you want. And you don't need a college degree. You don't need anything, right? And I've said this before in a bunch of other videos. In case this is the first time of you watching one of my videos, I'm a former accountant, and there's been some times where, just out of curiosity, also I've not done accounting in over a decade now, but there are some jobs that I've seen that say, okay, you need a bachelor's degree in accounting, and it pays $20 an hour. You're doing bookkeeping or internal auditing, and auditing's when you kind of study a company's financial records to make sure they're reporting everything correctly. Starting salary, $20 an hour. You must have a accounting degree, maybe be CPA eligible, maybe Big Four experience, whatever. You're like, all right, $20 an hour, okay. Or you can drive for Lyft and Uber without needing that degree, doing no studying, no going to a big university, not spending 4 years of your life doing that, and make 20-ish an hour. I'd say the average Lyft and Uber driver, depending on your area, and in case you didn't know, your location is the number one factor that determines how much money you can make. The average Lyft and Uber driver, I'd say, makes about $20 to $25 an hour. Yes, this does not really factor in things like taxes, expenses, other stuff, but whether you're an accountant, ironically, you get taxes taken out when you work. If you drive for Lyft and Uber, you get taxes taken out. As Benjamin Franklin said, the two things that are certain in life are death and taxes. And so when it comes to driving for Lyft and Uber, the fact that it's such a low barrier to entry, I think is a very underrated fact about it that's almost so obvious that we don't even realize how awesome it is, right? I mean, I've heard of some Lyft and Uber drivers who told me that they used to be a limo driver, or they used to be a truck driver, or they used to be some other type of driver, and they make more money through Uber and Lyft, and they don't need a special certification or class on their driver's license. They don't have to take all these exams. They don't have to go do all these rigorous driving tests and basically study how to drive a limo, for example, or drive a truck. They just drive for Lyft and Uber, and I've talked to a lot of drivers who, like, say, used to be a chauffeur, for example, and they're like, look, it's so much better. I can just start driving whenever I want. I don't need any other certificate or anything. I just start driving. Number 4, Uncapped. Now, this one, I will say, has a bit of an asterisk on that, which I'll talk about in a second. But I've used this analogy in so many other videos, and that is this. When I used to be a bartender, there were people begging my boss, being like, hey, I need to make more money. Can I have more hours? My boss would be like, no, sorry, we're already booked. I know I have you working last week for 20 hours. I can't give you anything more than 20. We have a fixed amount of people working. I can't give you any more hours. Or like say, if you're a salary job, which has a lot of bittersweet parts to it. When I used to be an accountant, if I worked 80 hours in a week, or if I worked 40 hours in a week, I made the same exact amount of money. Any accountant, especially at the Big Four, knows what I'm talking about, where if you get put on a bad client or it's busy season, your life sucks. There's no other way to word that. With Lyft and Uber, though, you can drive, in a sense, almost an unlimited amount of hours. If, let's say, 1 week you drive 10 hours, very small, almost part-time-ish type hours, and then the next week you want to drive 80 or 90 hours, go for it. Uber and Lyft will never say to you, like, hey, sorry, you drove too many hours last week. We don't have enough hours for you. No, you go out and you can drive. Now, there is an asterisk on that, and this is actually more for legal and safety reasons, because drowsy driving is very dangerous. In case you didn't know, every 30 seconds an accident happens as a result of someone driving too tired. I'm a huge advocate for being aware of drowsy driving, as I've done studies, and I find drowsy driving can actually be worse than drunk driving. And of course, not a fan of drunk driving at all, of course, right? Of course. But if you had to compare both of them, it has been shown that drowsy driving is the difference between no reaction and a delayed reaction when it comes to being inebriated, right? So just as a side note, but for a lot of places, it does depend area to area. But I'd say general, not always, but as a general guideline, typically in most places, you can drive maximum 12 hours a day for Uber and Lyft. I'd say for most people that is, I think, a good amount. That means you can drive, in a sense, maximum 84 hours in a week, right? I mean, let's be honest, that's awesome, right? That's awesome. I think that's amazing that when it comes to Lyft and Uber, you never have to worry about being uncapped. Now, yes, you may be saying, oh man, 84, I wish I could drive 90. Now, granted, there may be hacks. I have heard of some drivers that I've talked to who, let's say, want to do like a marathon week where they drove an absurd amount. I have talked to some drivers who found some hacks or workarounds. I don't really remember how they did it. And this also depends city to city, state to state, by the way, where some cities and states, I believe, actually don't have a cap on how much you can drive. I think other ones do. So it's weird how the legislation and the rules and the guidelines change from area to area, right? So I will say that. But at the end of the day, the fact that you can drive pretty much an unlimited amount of time is pretty awesome. Like I said, it's not like a situation when it comes to bartending, when I used to be a brand ambassador, right, for much different companies, and you're begging for hours because you need that money. With Lyft and Uber, you never really have to worry about that. Now, yes, there are pros and cons on both sides of everything I'm talking about here. I've talked a lot about the kind of negative stuff going on with Uber and Lyft, where, like, say, you could go out, and because there's too many drivers on the road, maybe you don't get as many rides as you used to, right? And especially if you don't have a minimum hourly guarantee or a minimum wage or a minimum threshold that you're going to make, things get a little dicey, I will say that. But it is still pretty awesome that you can pretty much drive an unlimited amount. And I do put the word unlimited with a bit of an asterisk on that, like I said, because there is that legal limit for safety reasons, right? Which is understandable. But even still, I mean, 84 hours in the week, and it's not like a salary job where whether you drive 40 or 80, you make the same amount. And it's not like a job like bartending or a bunch of other jobs. I just use that as an example because I used to be a bartender. It's not like those other jobs where, you know, your boss might say, no, sorry, you can only work 10 or 20 hours this week. With Lyft and Uber, it's pretty much an uncapped amount that you can work. Number 5, decent pay. Now I know this is where I'm going to get the most hate from my drivers. I will say that. But I do like to look at everything considered. I do like to look at everything. Now, I will say this. There's no denying this, and I feel like on this video, I'm trying to lean more towards the positive side than the negative side. I always like to be transparent. This is one that gets a little more in the positive and negative realm. I'd say the average driver makes about $20 to $25 an hour driving a Lyft and Uber. This is not factoring in a bunch of different things. Now, back in the day, for example, just to use one. Back in the day when I first started driving in 2015, Lyft and Uber took out a 20% cut. In case you don't know, any money that you make, you get split with Lyft and Uber. Back in the day, 20%. If I made $100, Uber and Lyft would get 20, I'd get 80. I thought that was very fair. They made the apps, they find all the people, I turn on the app, I do nothing. I just kind of follow the app and follow the instructions in a sense. All the algorithms and everything do everything for me in a sense. Now, I've heard it's high as 50%. I've even heard it's, depending on the area, which is kind of weird, some places take out 70%. So I will say, there's no denying this, and I do have to say this. Uber and Lyft drivers make way less money than before, and it seems like it's not been getting better. Now, there are a couple different ways to make more money driving Lyft and Uber. I have a link listed below in the description to a video I did about pro tips to make more money and everything. But I'd say the biggest one among all of them is to focus on the bonuses and incentives. With all this being said, though, right, because this could go down a whole other path on this video, I do think that when you factor in everything, the flexible schedule, the fact that you drive pretty much as much as you want, it's a very low barrier to entry. The fact that, you can instantly cash out that money, to be able to drive whenever you want, however you want, with an uncapped amount, and instantly be able to cash out that money without any certificate or degree or whatever, and make $20 to $25 an hour is pretty decent if you think about it. And I know I do bring up that accounting analogy a lot, and trust me, for all my drivers who say, oh man, I hate Lyft and Uber, I hate driving for Lyft and Uber, you think Lyft and Uber's bad, try working as an accountant or working for one of the big four. However bad you think Uber and Lyft is, doesn't even come close to the big four. In case you don't know, in the accounting world, there's 4 big public accounting firms, KPMG, PwC, Ernst & Young, and Deloitte. It's kind of like a fun little trivia question, in case you're curious. But anyway, I bring this up a lot because I remember all the work I had to go through in school. Studying, I studied on average 40 hours for every exam. Being an accountant's not easy, right? And I do all this stuff. I obviously, had student loans. I paid, my college was expensive, as we all know. And I see accounting jobs online that require a bachelor's degree in business and accounting and pay $20 an hour. Or I can skip all those years, all that, like say, potential student loans and debt and all this work and all this studying and just drive for Lyft and Uber. And I can work on my own terms, however I want, whenever I want, not having an annoying accounting boss breathing down my neck and screaming at me. You'd be surprised, people in the accounting world, or maybe not surprising, can be ruthless and super annoying to work with. All these benefits about Lyft and Uber that I've talked about. Now, of course, I do have to say, like I said earlier, yes, the pay has been getting worse in terms of Uber and Lyft drivers are making a bit less than before. Uber and Lyft's taking out a bigger cut than before, and your expenses have been going up. It is kind of the triple threat, so to speak, kind of going against Uber and Lyft drivers hopefully that does change in the future. And I do have to say that to be transparent on this video. With that being said, though, I have interviewed a lot of drivers, though, depending on the area, who are like, oh yeah, I make on average 30 an hour. That's insane. If I saw an accounting job, like doing bookkeeping, for example, that required a degree and said minimum 30 an hour or you start 30 an hour, I'd be like, no way. 30 an hour to do bookkeeping and I just need my bachelor's degree in accounting, which I already have? Great. Or then I realize, oh yeah, I don't need any of that and I can just drive for Lyft and Uber. Now, of course, I know some drivers are saying, wait, 30 an hour, no way, but it does depend upon your area. Your location is the #1 factor that determines how much money you can make. And I've talked to a lot of drivers in a lot of places who make 30 plus an hour, and it's pretty insane to think that with all these benefits being considered, to make 30 an hour with all these pros and all these amazing parts that I've talked about, that's pretty wild, right? And I know some drivers might heavily disagree with me on this, but I think when you compare the average amount, and when you compare the amount that Uber drivers and Lyft drivers make, and when you compare that to all the other jobs out there, all the other really good jobs and all the other really bad jobs, Lyft and Uber not only pays a good amount more than a lot of other jobs, but also has all these benefits that none of these other jobs have. And now, a bonus benefit of being an Uber driver and a Lyft driver, and this is an awesome one that, again, I think is both underrated, but also not a lot of people know about, and that is no quota. I have had some people say to me, like, hey, Mark, I want to drive, but, like, I don't know what my schedule's like. Like, I don't know if I can drive this week. What about next week? I don't know. Here's the thing. Not only is Uber and Lyft instantaneously flexible, I've mentioned that in a lot of videos, and I feel like in this day and age, most people do understand you turn on the app whenever you want, you turn it off whenever you want. But I think maybe something that a lot of people don't think about or don't even know is there's no quota. I can drive and do, let's say, 100 rides in 1 month. Not drive for 3 months, then do another 100 rides. I can go all out and drive as many hours as I can in 1 week, not drive for 6 months, and then drive again. Now, I will say, of course, you need to keep things up to date. Uber and Lyft does need your most recent insurance, your registration on your car. Your car does have to be inspected once a year to make sure it's in good condition when it comes to driving. Of course, we're having passengers in it and everything. But besides all that kind of stuff, which is kind of typical when it comes to owning a car, I mean, when it comes to Uber and Lyft, it is awesome that there's no quota. I feel like if there was a quota, that would add a little annoying stress or pressure, right? Because, I mean, for almost any industry out there, if I work for a little bit and then I don't work at all for months, the chance of me going back and being like, hey, can I work again, is super minimal. I mean, I'd have to think of any other job, even YouTube, in case you didn't know. If I stop posting videos on YouTube, of course, I make money on my YouTube videos. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's like an exact clear-cut thing when it comes to YouTube. But if, let's say I was inactive, as YouTube calls it, for, let's say, 6 months, and I did not post anything, I didn't do anything, I probably would stop making money on YouTube. I'd have to reapply to be in what's called the YouTube Partner Program again, right? I can't really think of any other job that's like this, which there's no minimum quota, and to stay in the payroll system where I could just months later be like, hey, can I work again? I know I didn't work for the past 6 months. Do you mind if I start making money again? With Lyft and Uber, you can. There's absolutely no quota to driving. And like I said, when you combine this with all these aspects of having a flexible schedule, instant cash outs, the fact that you can drive pretty much an uncapped amount of time, there's such a low barrier to entry, and the pay is very, very decent, especially, like I said, your location is such a big factor of how much money you can make. I've met drivers, not just 1 or 2, but a good amount of drivers who make 6 figures driving, and they love it, right? So with all these things considered, Uber and Lyft is truly an incredible job to have.